Black cohosh. That's the plant. Cherokee communities called it a life-giving root, not as poetry, not as legend, but as documented, practiced knowledge passed down carefully. A 1947 academic journal quietly confirmed it, the Journal of the Washington Academy of Sciences, a paper almost nobody reads anymore. Right now, that same plant grows along roadsides across Appalachia, getting yanked from backyards and tossed in yard waste bags. Meanwhile, every major herbal pharmacy sells it in capsule form for $40. Nobody mentions where the knowledge came from. Stay with me. Here is where it gets strange, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, document-heavy way that somehow makes it stranger. While going through archived educational records, actual federal education documents, not a wellness blog, not a supplement company's backstory page, a PDF surfaced. Document number ED396878, filed through the ERIC system, which is a federal database of educational research. Inside that file, a Cherokee plant curriculum, a teaching document, and black cohosh is listed in it. Not as mythology, not as ceremony, as a medicinal plant with a documented history of use, studied and recorded for educational purposes. That detail should not surprise you, but it will once you hold the other end of it. Because alongside that curriculum listing, there's another document, a monograph, an academic plant profile published through Virginia Tech and Frostburg University. Full bibliography, detailed phytochemical data, a complete record of Cherokee use mapped against botanical research, the kind of document that exists quietly in university, botany departments, and gets cited in graduate theses that most people will never read. This root doesn't look like medicine. That's the first thing that hits you when you see a photograph of it. It's dark, gnarled, the kind of thing you'd kick out of a garden bed without a second glance. It smells bitter, sharp. Nothing about it signals value to a modern eye trained on clean capsule packaging and branded wellness labels. But that's precisely the point. Here is the part where it stops sounding like folk belief. A peer-reviewed study published in 2018 in a journal called Medicines looked specifically at the phytochemistry of Cherokee aromatic medicinal plants. Not a wellness blog, not a supplement company study, a peer-reviewed academic paper, indexed, published, publicly available. And black cohosh is in it. What the research documents are compounds inside the root, naturally occurring chemicals that interact with the body's own signaling systems. Nothing invented, nothing synthesized. Plant chemistry that Cherokee communities had identified through generations of careful, accumulated observation, long before the word phytochemistry existed. This is where it changes. Because the same compounds in that dark, gnarled root you would pull from your backyard are the same compounds the supplement industry is now bottling, branding, and selling in polished capsule form. Same plant, same chemistry, same mechanism, different packaging, very different price. Black cohosh wasn't a footnote in Cherokee plant knowledge. It was part of a larger, documented system. Multiple ethnobotanical surveys confirmed it. Even the most mainstream summary sources confirm it. The compiled academic record is accessible enough that it's been synthesized into publicly available reference pages drawing on generations of documented indigenous plant use. And here is where the timeline starts to matter. This knowledge moved. It traveled a path. Cherokee communities held and used it. Early Appalachian settlers, living close to the land and largely without access to physicians, observed and adopted it. Frontier medicine absorbed it. By the 19th century, it had entered American medical literature in a more formal way, listed in botanical dispensatories, referenced by the eclectic physicians, a recognized movement of American doctors who used plant-based treatments and had a substantial following before pharmaceutical standardization arrived. The paper trail exists. You just have to know where to look. United Plant Savers traces it. The citation chain runs all the way back to Witoft, 1947, in the Journal of the Washington Academy of Sciences. That number has been sitting in the background since the first sentence. This is why it matters. Because 1947 is not ancient history, it's recent enough that the people who read that paper were still alive when commercial supplement culture started to bloom. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. By the mid-20th century, black cohosh was already appearing in commercial preparations, tinctures, extracts, eventually capsules. You can trace the product evolution through pharmacy history without much difficulty. But something happened to the label. The Cherokee origin didn't come with the product. The name of the knowledge system that developed this use, observed this root, and passed this understanding down carefully. That part quietly dropped away. What remained was a marketable plant. What disappeared was the context that explained where the knowledge came from and why it mattered. Not forgotten by accident, repackaged on purpose. And here is the question that changes everything. At what point exactly did this knowledge stop being knowledge and start being a product? Because the answer to that question explains a great deal more than just one root. It explains a system, and that system is what we're going to walk straight into. The eclectic physicians are worth pausing on for a moment, because most people have never heard of them, and that absence is part of the story. In the 19th century, the eclectic movement was not fringe. It was a legitimate, practiced school of American medicine, with its own colleges, its own journals, its own dispensatories, thick reference volumes listing plant-based treatments, dosages, preparation methods, clinical observations. Black cohosh appeared in those volumes. It was referenced by name, described in detail, and recommended for specific applications by practicing physicians who had real patients and real results. This was not folk rumor. This was documented American medical practice. The eclectics were drawing, knowingly or not, from a knowledge base that indigenous communities had developed and refined long before European settlement. Cherokee plant use fed into Appalachian herbal practice. Appalachian herbal practice fed into frontier medicine. Frontier medicine fed into the eclectics. The eclectics put it in print, in formal medical language, in volumes that sat on physicians' shelves. The pipeline was real. The documentation exists. And then standardization arrived. Here is the part nobody tells you, not because it's secret exactly, but because it's structural. And structural stories are harder to sell than villain stories. In the early 20th century, American medicine began consolidating around a single framework. Pharmaceutical regulation expanded. Clinical trial requirements tightened. The rules for what counted as legitimate medicine became increasingly expensive to satisfy. Not impossible, expensive. And here is the critical detail. Black cohosh, like nearly every plant-based remedy, could not be patented. Nobody owned it. Nobody could own it. It grew in the ground. It had been growing in the ground for thousands of years. That meant nobody had a financial incentive to run the expensive trials that would earn it an official medical designation. Not banned because it was dangerous, sidelined because it was free. The eclectic colleges closed. The botanical dispensatories went out of print. Plant knowledge that had traveled a documented path from Cherokee communities through Appalachian practice, through formal American medicine, quietly lost its institutional home. It didn't vanish, but it got reclassified, moved from medicine to supplement, from treatment to suggestion, from household knowledge to specialty product. And that is exactly when the $40 capsule became possible. Now go back to that Virginia Tech and Frostburg University monograph, because this is the payoff. That document, a full academic plant profile with bibliography, phytochemical analysis, field documentation, and Cherokee use records, is freely available, not behind a paywall, not classified, not suppressed in any dramatic sense, just sitting quietly in an academic archive, almost never cited in mainstream wellness media, almost never referenced on the supplement company websites that sell the very plant it documents. The 2018 study published in Medicine's, peer-reviewed, indexed on ResearchGate, and accessible through PubMed, confirmed the phytochemical basis of what Cherokee plant knowledge had identified generations earlier. The compounds are real. The mechanism is real. The history connecting the root to a documented tradition of use is real. All of it is in print, publicly available, and almost entirely absent from the conversation happening in supplement aisles. That is not an accident of oversight. That is what happens when knowledge becomes a product. The origin story stops being useful to the people selling the product, so it disappears from the label, and eventually from the conversation, Here's what this means for you right now. Black cohosh grows across the eastern United States. Woodlands, roadside edges, backyard tree lines. It is not rare. It is not exotic. It is not a plant that requires a special order from an overseas supplier or a premium wellness retailer. It is, in many parts of this country, exactly the kind of plant that gets dismissed as underbrush. The $40 capsule at the health store and the plant growing quietly along a fence line in rural Appalachia are the same organism, same root, same compounds, same history. The price difference is not about the plant. It is entirely about the branding. That doesn't mean harvest randomly. Plant identification matters. Context matters. But what it does mean is this: the gap between ordinary household plant knowledge and expensive packaged wellness culture is not a gap of science. It is a gap of marketing. And that gap was not natural. It was constructed, slowly over decades, as knowledge that once belonged to communities got absorbed into commercial systems that had no interest in crediting the source. This plant was not discovered by a supplement company. It was not invented in a lab. It was documented, used, shared, observed, and refined across generations, and then quietly rebranded as a product with a logo on the front, and no acknowledgement of origin anywhere on the label. The Cherokee communities who developed this knowledge did not do so in secret. They did not hide it. It moved into the wider world through contact, observation, and documentation. It ended up in academic journals, in federal education archives, in university botany monographs, in 19th century medical dispensatories, in peer-reviewed phytochemistry studies. The record is there. It just requires following it past where most people stop. You are exactly that kind of person. The kind who follows a fact past the comfortable stopping point. The kind who looks at a $40 capsule and wants to know what was on the land before the label existed. Have you ever walked past this plant without knowing what you were looking at? Drop it in the comments, because you may have passed it more times than you realize. Black cohosh is one root in a system that documented dozens of plants. And the next one on that list has an even stranger paper trail.